Welcome to Content with Character, the weekly podcast that'll give you the momentum you need to create content with more ease, clarity, and laughter. I'm your host, content copywriter Emily Aborn, and I'm all about unconventional marketing approaches. I believe in your big ideas, and I'm excited to help you share them in a way that's distinctly you. Thanks to the recommendation and invitation of my friend Alicia, also a fellow podcaster, I recently joined a women podcasters group where we all support each other as fellow podcasters. We listen to each other, write reviews, share for each other, meet regularly, and just in general kibitz about podcaster problems. Well, and our wins, of course. So as I was listening to some of the episodes of the other members of the group, one of the things I noticed was that in some cases, people played their quick little intro music, but then they didn't kind of welcome me to the show and let me know why I should continue listening to the episode. Now, I should say this was in just a couple of instances, but I kind of wanted this sort of answer to my question of well, what's this episode about? Or who is this person? Or what is this podcast all about? So in some cases, they got to it later. But it was one of those things I just picked up on, I noticed, and as a podcaster, I used to also ignore doing that. I never told people who I was. I even had a co-host, and I never told them who they were. Now, when I first started listening to lots and lots of podcasts, I realized that the best ones are the ones that even just take 2 little seconds to kind of tell you who they are, what they do, and what they're all about. Because what happens is people don't tend to listen to our podcasts starting at episode 0 or starting at episode 1 and going straight through. Although I do know who you are and you know who you are, and I know that you are binging mine from start to finish right now as I record this. But most people don't do that. They often kind of discover a podcast, right? And then they pick out one that calls to them or maybe has a topic that's relevant to them or that somebody sent them, and then they start listening and loving or listening and never listening again from there. Why am I telling you all this? Well, in some cases, it doesn't matter, actually, right? Depending on how well known you are, how people tend to find your show, how your episodes are structured, it may not matter for you. But for me, Emily Aborn, you know this by now. If you are a regular listener, I do solo episodes, and I do solely solo episodes, meaning I really want to get to know you. I want you to feel welcomed in and have a clear understanding of what we're all about. Because for me, this is kind of like a conversation between you and me. And so if this is your first time listening, or if you've mentally checked out the other 60 odd times I've given you context, I like to tell you who I am. So this is why I started, it was not too long ago, honestly. I started introducing myself and just kind of trying to provide a little bit of context each and every time I release an episode. I think this is good no matter how we are sharing in our businesses. And I just like to remind us of this time and time again, because not everyone knows who you are or what you do or how you work or who you work with. You may feel, and I know I feel this way, you may feel like you have said it 1,000,000 times, 7 million times you've heard yourself say it, but that does not mean that they have. And it also doesn't mean that it's stuck with them those times, right? So there are some little easy ways to add it into various things you share, but I would encourage you to do it. I would share it whenever you can, short and concisely. And so on that note, I guess I'll just do it for you right here. I am Emily Aborn. I'm your faithful and exuberant, you can tell by the sound of my voice, podcast host. I'm also a copywriter, which means I write a bunch of stuff like websites, blogs, marketing materials for small business owners. See how easy that was? Simple, concise. And I gotta say, I am just so happy. I'm really, really happy that you're here. I know I haven't told you lately how much I love you, and I want to say it today because I truly, truly do. I thank you for being here, sticking with me through the thick, the thin, the obvious, and the I'm still working this thought out, but hear me out. So I just want to say thank you. Thank you for being you. And as stated in the introduction to the show, my goal with this podcast is really to help you unlock more of what makes you you, but also share it in a way where you're having as much of a blast as I am clearly in making these episodes for you. So that said, If you ever have a question or a comment or something you're struggling with, something you want me to tackle, no topic off limits as long as I have knowledge in it. I do welcome the two-way street, right? The conversation around the podcast, because that's exactly what I view this as, a conversation between you and me. So there are lots of fun ways to get in touch, send thoughts, questions, etc. They're always in the show notes. I'm extremely organized and everything is in the show notes. You can text, email, leave a voicemail, connect on social, however you like to do such things. And if you can't find show notes, just shortcut it all. Go to my website, emilyaborn.com, and peruse until you figure out what you want, or send me a messenger pigeon or a raven, and I'll get you squared away. Okay, without further ado, I know I just a-doed a bit, but hopefully that was like a little semi-micro lesson in there and a little bit helpful. Let's get into today's episode. By the time this airs, I will have released my interview with TC Burr, host of the Yet podcast. TC was a fabulous host and he asked great questions. And one thing I really loved is that he gave me an idea ahead of time of what he kind of wanted to chit-chat about. I loved this because it shows me that he's organized. I also love preparation. That is the sixth love language, FYI, and it is definitely mine. I also liked it because questions that people ask you when you're a podcast guest or when you're a panelist or when you've just done a workshop and people raise their hand and ask you questions, or questions that come up in your client calls. These are fantastic springboards for content, okay? And in this case, it's an entire episode. Actually, in TC's case, he inspired me in not only one, but 2 episodes of Content with Character with his fantastic questions. And in case you missed the first one, it was the July 2nd episode, answering the question, can content creation actually be fun? So if you missed that one, I'll make sure that the links to that episode are in the show notes and the links to TC's podcast, because I highly recommend you check that out. All right, so today we're going to get into one of his other questions he sent me, which was, what advice would you give to someone just starting out? Are you ready? Are you excited? I am. Okay, here's the thing about advice. It's like opinions. Right? Advice is like opinions. Everyone's got some, but not everyone's is valid. Not everyone's is relevant. And my advice, someone else's advice, may or may not be right for you. So with that kind of like stirring around in my mind, I was like, ooh, it would be so fun to put a little spin on his question. And I'm actually going to do this a different way. I'm going to share a couple of things I wish I'd known before I started a business. Now, I'm going to use general entrepreneurship as kind of like my milestone, but I have different ideas for what I wish I would have known before I started this specific business. And just like I wish I'd known that, you can't assume anything about your podcast listeners. You do need to tell people coming to your website who you are and what you do. Networking connections don't always know your name and your profession. These are going to just be a couple of things I wish I'd known before just going headfirst, no parachute, into entrepreneurship. I recently went to a wedding that I wasn't actually very excited about leading up to the wedding. Now, I don't know why I didn't think it would be that fun, but in my head, it was just like this long drive, wearing uncomfortable clothes. It was too late at night. I didn't really feel connected. And overall, I just wasn't looking forward to the experience. It felt to me like it was just going to be like unenjoyable and like an obligation. Well, when I got there, guess what? Shocker, it ended up being a total blast. And like the weather was not nice. It was pouring rain. It was freezing cold. I was freezing the entire time. They had the air conditioner blasting despite it being cold out. I still had so much fun, and I was so happy we went. My husband and I had a great conversation on the way up, a great conversation on the way back. I got some super duper quality time with my aunties, my uncle, my cousins, my brothers, my parents, my husband, and my now married family member. They did a really great job at the wedding of bringing everyone together and just like welcoming them in to be a part of the event. It was like really fun. It was great. I wish I'd known how great it was going to be going in, because I think I would have been able to circumvent the 3 weeks of dread I felt leading up to the wedding. I would have just felt really, really excited instead of, no, I don't want to do this. Now, there are always going to be things in life that we have expectations for being one way, and they don't go as expected. They turn out better, they turn out worse, or just different, right? And so that's why I think that building on our repertoire of experiences, and even like journaling out how it went for us, sharing these stories with other people, I think it can be really, really beneficial to our brains, because next time, it's not necessarily that you're going to have more realistic expectations. I mean, like I said, expectations don't really mean anything. It could go any way. But what it does help you do is to build confidence in yourself that no matter what, whether it's a letdown, whether it's amazing, no matter what, you have the resources to get through it. No matter what, you can get through it. And what you choose to believe heading into something should just be the best. I mean, that's really how we should approach a lot of things in life, right? Like, this is going to be the best. I'm going to get something from it, or I'm going to give something to it. And no matter what, I think that building on these kind of experiences, it can help you to maybe choose differently next time if you want. So I also want to caveat the whole episode, or like this whole concept of advice or things I wish I'd known. Like, I think that everything happens for a reason. It happens in the right timing. And I want to say I'm one of those people. I do have regrets, but it's like I also know that if I had changed one thing, it would change everything. So I don't necessarily actually have regrets I wish I could like do differently, okay? I would have loved to know some things that would help me to bypass and avoid some mistakes. But do I regret anything? Not really. So that's kind of how I feel about learning from other entrepreneurs too. They can share their ideas, they can share their experiences, they can share their stories with you, how they feel about it. It's all helpful. But at the end of the day, you're going to go through it the way that you go through it. And that's probably the right way to go through it. Things may go as planned, things may not go as planned, but I promise you this, you do have the resources to get through it, or you will find them along the way. You will find them. So, and if you ever need help on that, like that's what people like me in your life are for. So pep talk over, let's get into it. I have 3 of them for you. What I wish I'd known. Number 1, some of us know before we try. Some of us think we know before we try. And some of us know we don't know until we try. I know that was like a little bit of a word sandwich, so let's break this riddle down. I often tell people in my life, like I struggle with spatial and visualization problems. So for example, those IQ tests that give you a shape and then ask you to select the image that's the same shape but rotated, my brain is like, no. Or when somebody verbally tells me about a scene in a book or a scene in a movie, it doesn't matter how many details they give. I cannot follow when I try to watch a video explanation of how to do something, especially things that involve heights, weights, measures, distances. Like my head just spins out a little and it's a lot. I really need things like written down, drawn, 3D renderings, maps, diagrams, visuals. What I need is to experience the thing. And this happens to me throughout my life. I can't usually feel or imagine how I will feel about a given thing until I do it. I don't know how I think or feel about a person until I've been in their space for a little bit, given them a minute or two, right? Like I am actually that annoying person who says, I don't know, I will know it when I see it, or I will know it when I feel it, okay? So here are just some like examples on how this has worked out in the business world for me. You know, maybe I've said yes to an event where I think it sounds fun and I don't actually process or think through how I'll feel the day that it comes when I've overcommitted and now I have to go to this thing that I don't actually maybe want to do. Maybe I say yes to a project or a person before I've had given it time to simmer and think about or feel how I really feel about it. I also can tend to take a long time to know if somebody or a collaboration is like actually for me or not. Like a lot of my clarity comes in reflection, right? So this is like for better or worse, I think. Like sometimes this is good because you're more likely to just like kind of dive on in. And sometimes it's bad because you get burned. The other place this has shown up for me is in like adding services before realizing, like when I take them on and do them, that I just really actually hate doing this task. Like, what was I thinking? So the list goes on. I've gotten a lot better because I've had the chance to experience more things, and now retrospectively or retroactively, however that works, I now know how I feel about them. But in many cases, I'm one of those people who just like, I kind of struggle to imagine how I will feel with things that I haven't experienced. So some people on the flip side, they just know. They don't need to become best pals, fast friends with somebody to know that they're not a good fit. They don't need to grab onto an idea that somebody randomly shared with them about what they should do and execute on it to know that it's not for them. And they don't need to start an entire business before realizing, okay, maybe that's not actually the business for me. I think that there's a spectrum. There is a spectrum to knowing how you're going to feel and knowing what you want and knowing what you think about something, and then like having no idea until you get started. And that is something I wish I knew before I started my business. I wish I had a little more self-awareness to know where I fell on this spectrum that I didn't actually even know existed. Instead of kind of like had I had that awareness, I kind of maybe would have thought things through a little differently. But instead, I went with the whole like follow your heart, start before you're ready. And I did that 3 times. I did that with 3 different businesses. Now, in some cases, it worked out really well for me and things evolved over time in the most beautiful, wonderful way. And in other cases, it really did not go well for me and things spiraled out of my control unintentionally and not with a lot of thought. So I think that if I had been aware of how I know that something is for me is to actually be doing it, I would have done this. I would have reached out to people who were already doing the things that I wanted to do. I would have reached out to them and asked them lots of questions. I would have asked them what they really love about what they do, what maybe mistakes they've made, what should I avoid, what do they wish they'd done differently. And that would really help me to know a little bit better how I might feel going in. I think with some more tangible examples and doing some preparation ahead of time, I would have known a little bit better how I might feel going in. So today, I kind of ask better questions. I ask maybe, here's a great one, how many calls am I committing to before I sign up to this membership? Or what's expected of me in this sponsorship? I set better boundaries up front around time, communication, deliverables. I talk to other people who have tried things that I might want to try. And I do a lot of this. I journal a lot about pros and cons and expectations and what's this really going to look like and what other areas of my life is this going to impact. I do this a lot. And when I'm really stuck and I don't know which decision to make or whether to go or whether to slow or whether to stop, I bring in experts who can really help guide me through. So that's the first thing I wish I'd known. I wish I'd known that following your heart and going all in can be balanced with solid understanding and seeing a realistic picture, and not just a realistic picture for somebody else, but like really seeing a realistic picture for you. Because the reality is, it is now great. I love what I do. I mean, I really, really love what I do. But it took me a lot of crying on my office floor, like wondering how I got myself into this predicament. It took me a lot of time and wavering and mistakes to finally get to where I love and what I love. And I think a lot of that could have been circumvented, to use my same word again, by just like asking a lot of people a lot of questions from the beginning. Because what ends up happening in a lot of cases that I see with entrepreneurs is they spend a lot of money, a lot of time, and a lot of energy on things that actually maybe they don't need along the way, right? Because they didn't know what they were kind of getting themselves into. So I think there's this balance. There's this balance of being over-prepared and under-prepared. And I want to just say the blanket advice that you see out there of just diving all in, chasing your dreams, it's not for everyone. Like, you're gonna kind of fall somewhere on this spectrum of how that looks for you. And in fairness, not everyone has that luxury. Like, I know that when I was transitioning from my first business to my now business, I had to do two things at once. I had to build this slowly while also closing another thing down. I had to take micro, tiny, painful baby steps towards my next dream. Now, that could look like chasing your dreams, right? But I know that, like, for some of us, chasing your dreams, following your heart, it's also being resilient. It's also being plucky, scrappy as heck, because your mortgage company, my mortgage company, they're not a big fan of massive parachuteless leaps. I hope that all kind of made sense. Okay, second thing I wish I'd known before I started. This shouldn't come as any surprise to us by now, especially if you listen to this podcast, but shortcuts, overnight successes, hacks, it's just not usually a thing for most of us, okay? I knew that going in, sort of, but I didn't know. You know what I mean? Like, when you know something, you know it from head to toe, and I did not know it from head to toe. I still kind of believed that some business Prince Charming fairy tale, some magic ticket would transport me to where I wanted to go overnight, and bada bang, bada boom, snap my fingers and success. Our society is a big fan of quick, easy solutions. And one thing I've learned about health, life, business, relationships is that quick and easy does not tend to be long-term. Quick and easy actually doesn't tend to be a solution for many of us. And I see it all the time. Like, as business owners, there are times when you're struggling, you're overwhelmed, you're feeling the squeeze in some way, and you reach for the nearest thing, like the guidance of a coach or a course or a listening ear, or you pull your community, or you try this hack, or you try this trend, or you try this shortcut. But even with a coach or a consultant, like, sometimes it's a person who actually doesn't have your best interest in mind, or it was a person who was committed to misunderstanding you and your vision, or they didn't have relevant knowledge in your specific area of need or struggle, or they weren't actually where you want to be. So maybe you didn't even respect or admire them. And this, I'm like applying this to like the courses and the communities and the listening ears and coaches. Like, it's all just kind of like ways we reach for quick solutions to get ourselves out of pain. I file all of those experiences under quick and easy because it, for me, ends up being like, oh my God, I just grappled at something, anything I could find to ease that discomfort. Some questions you can ask yourself when you are reaching for something is, do they have my best interest in mind? Are they serving maybe some sort of a secret agenda of their own instead? Are they excited about my business and vision? Is this aligned with my business and vision? Does this have the knowledge or the expertise to really help me in what I'm going through? Do I admire the person doing the course or being the coach? Do I admire and respect them and the decisions that they make? And I also think that you want somebody that you trust, or people in your life that you trust to help guide you. Someone who's willing to do the work to really help you define your version of success and not theirs. And so that's kind of just like blanket for the quick fixes and solutions. You really can run yourself ragged with somebody else's hack, somebody else's vision. And often what that looks like is just a long road of never really getting to where you wanted in the first place. Courses, magical hashtags, products, services, trends, hacks, hip checks. There are no shortcuts. And I do wish I'd known that. All right, last one, real quick, things I wish I'd known before I started. I wish I'd known that failure is a wide open door. It is a beginning and not an end. Now, because the topic of failure is so prevalent for people, I did a whole episode on it. I think a lot of people are hesitant to just call failure, or a mistake. I'm not that person. I'm probably maybe too quick to label something a failure or a mistake. But here's the thing. Each and every time that I've failed or made a mistake, it truly did open a door to bring something else, or clarity, or start me down a new path, or provide new perspective. It has always been only the beginning. And it can be really, really painful when you're going through it. So I think it's always just a helpful reminder to know that failure is truly a wide open door. It is a beginning, not an end. When we closed our first business, it wasn't actually because we weren't profitable. On paper, it was successful. It was a personal decision. But nonetheless, even though I knew it was what was best for us, I did feel that I had failed. I had created this plan, this goal of this being my end game, right? My final stop, my final destination. And in reaching that, I failed. I failed to execute when I thought that this was a dream. I failed in that I felt like I had wasted 5 years building this business and then gave it up and changed my mind completely, or changed my direction completely, I should say. And that was just the beginning of many, many, many more failures to come. But that decision, that failure, was the very best one of my entrepreneurial journey so far. Letting that go propelled me in so many ways to my next step, to clarity, to fulfillment, to satisfaction, and yes, of course, more failures. But failure is always going to be a part of it. I think it's okay. I think it's probably necessary. And just keep in mind when it happens, when you make a mistake, when you fail, it's a beginning, not an end. So quick recap. 3 things. I wish I'd known you don't always have to get yourself into the thick of something before you realize it's not for you. You can also ask questions, talk to people who have gone before you. Wait, there's a thought. Research, dip your toes in. There's a whole slew of other options. It is truly a spectrum. Following your dreams, going all in, that is a spectrum. And sometimes you don't truly know how you feel until you experience something. And that's a great way to learn too. That is okay too. Number 2, there really are no shortcuts, hacks, hashtags, overnight success secrets, quickie courses, products that can fix all your problems. Entrepreneurship is a long game. That actually shouldn't stop you or make you feel well, no. If anything, I think that's really inspiring, and it helps me to feel a whole lot less frantic. Okay, I have time. Take a deep breath. Number 3, failure is not an end. It is a beginning. And again, from a person who's failed more times than I can count, it is going to be okay. In next week's episode, we're going to talk about a little bit of a failure. We're actually going to talk about how to end an era. What do you do when you run out of steam for good? And in some cases, you have to kiss something goodbye. Maybe it's even a huge piece of you, a huge part of your life. That might feel like failing. It might be seen by others as failing, but we're going to go ahead and do it together. We're going to kiss an era goodbye. We're going to let things go. We're going to bless and release, and we're going to do it side by side. So I have a lot more things that I wish I'd known, and I'm sure that you do too. And these 3 just felt relevant for the time that we had today and for the season we're in. But let's please not stop this conversation. Send me what you wish you'd known before you started your business or started working with other entrepreneurs, and I want to talk about it. This episode, who knows, maybe we'll have a part 2 featuring what you wish you'd known before you got started, and I'll respond to it. So until next week, my friend, be well and bye-bye. Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Content with Character. If you loved the episode, please make sure to subscribe to the podcast, rate, review, and share it with someone else you know it could help. For more content and visibility tips, visit my blog at emilyaborn.com, and be sure to connect with me on Instagram at emilyaborn. I'd love to hear how this inspired you to take action.